My wife was a professional in her field, but until she sucked him off. My name's Nick, and up until a month ago, I thought I had it all figured out. A loving wife, Lisa, a comfortable home, and 10 years of marriage that I thought were built on trust. But as it turns out, there was a crack in the foundation that I didn't notice until it was too late. Lisa is an artist, a really talented one, too. She paints these surreal, dreamy landscapes that make people stop and stare. A couple of months back, she got invited to a prestigious art exhibition in New York City. It was a big deal for her career, and I was genuinely proud. I remember packing her suitcase and joking about how I'd be eating instant noodles while she was out there mingling with the elite. But something started feeling off after she came back. Lisa wasn't the same. She'd always been a little scattered artist, right? But this time it was different. She was jumpy, her phone always glued to her hand. She started working late into the night, claiming she was inspired by the trip. At first, I didn't think much of it. She's an artist. Inspiration strikes when it strikes. Then came the lies, or what I now know were lies. She'd leave for hours at a time, saying she was meeting with potential clients or working at the gallery. I wanted to believe her, but something wasn't adding up. The way she dodged my questions, how her stories never seemed to line up, and the strange way she'd laugh at texts she never explained. I brushed it off at first. I mean, who wants to think their wife is lying to them? But one night, everything changed. Lisa was out working late, and I decided to surprise her by dropping off dinner at the gallery. When I got there, the place was locked up tight, the lights off. No sign of Lisa. I called her, and she answered immediately, claiming she was right in the middle of a big piece and couldn't talk. That was when the first real crack appeared in the picture-perfect image I had of my marriage. But the thing about cracks is, once you see one, you start noticing all the others. And trust me, they were everywhere. After the night at the gallery, my mind wouldn't rest. I sat on the couch, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Lisa's voice over the phone played on a loop in my head. Calm, convincing, almost too perfect. But I'd been standing outside that gallery, staring at the darkened windows when she claimed to be right in the middle of a big piece. The doubt dug into me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I started paying closer attention to her. It wasn't like I wanted to be some paranoid husband. I didn't want to be that guy. But the little things started piling up. Her phone, for instance. Lisa had always been the type to leave it lying around, forgotten on the counter or shoved into her purse. Now, it was practically an extension of her hand. If she wasn't scrolling through it, she was flipping it face down the second I walked into the room. And then there was her sudden obsession with privacy. She'd never been secretive before, but now she had a password on everything. Her laptop, her phone, even her tablet. When I asked her why, she laughed and said, "Oh, just being careful. I've got a lot of client info on there." Client info? Lisa painted dreamy forests and abstract oceans. What client information could she possibly have that needed that level of security? It all came to a head one Saturday night. Lisa was out again, this time at an artist networking event. I told myself I wasn't going to snoop, that I was better than that, but curiosity got the better of me. Her laptop was sitting on the kitchen table, open but locked, the screen glowing faintly in the dark room. I didn't know her password, but something told me to check her browser history. I reached for her phone, knowing it was a long shot. To my surprise, she'd left it charging in the kitchen, a rookie mistake. When I unlocked it, yes, I knew her PIN. She wasn't always this secretive. I wasn't prepared for what I found. The browser was open to a tab she clearly hadn't expected me to see. My eyes scanned the title, and my stomach dropped. How to cover your tracks in an affair. My hands went cold. I scrolled further, finding searches like best private chat apps and discreet hotels NYC. The kind of things you don't Google when you're painting landscapes and selling to suburban collectors. I sat down hard, the weight of everything hitting me all at once. Lisa, my Lisa, the woman I'd loved for 10 years, the mother of our 2 dogs, the person who cried at Disney movies, was hiding something. Something big. And that wasn't even the worst part. Tucked between those searches was a website I didn't recognize. Out of morbid curiosity, I clicked it. It loaded slowly, the page revealing itself bit by bit. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. It seemed like a forum, the kind of thing where people shared photos and stories. But as I scrolled, I realized what it was. It was a very adult website, where users posted their own videos and photos for others to view. And then I saw it, a thumbnail of Lisa. The thumbnail wasn't clear. It was blurry, low quality. But it was her. Her face, her hair, her smile. She was sitting on a couch I didn't recognize, laughing with someone just out of frame. My stomach churned, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I clicked on the thumbnail, but it wouldn't play without an account. The room felt like it was spinning. My wife was on a site like this? With someone else? Who was filming her? And why? The questions swirled around me, each one more horrifying than the last. I closed the phone, my mind racing. Whatever this was, it wasn't just a fling or some emotional affair. This was something darker, something deliberate, and I had to know the truth that I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thumbnail, Lisa on a stranger's couch, smiling like she didn't have a care in the world. It didn't make sense. None of it did. My wife wasn't the kind of person who'd get tangled up in something like that. Or at least, I didn't think she was. But the image was burned into my brain, and there was no ignoring it. By morning, I had decided I needed to see what was on that site. I couldn't confront her without knowing the full truth. If I didn't, she'd just gaslight me, twist the story, and leave me wondering if I was the crazy one. I created an account using a burner email I made on the spot. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment as I hesitated. Did I really want to do this? To dig deeper into the kind of truth that might destroy me? But then I thought about the lies, the distance, the locked doors. I thought about that night at the gallery, and the way she'd smiled at her phone like it held a world I wasn't part of. I pressed enter. Once I logged in, I searched the site for her thumbnail. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the page, scanning for her face among a sea of strangers. Finally, I found it again. Click. The video loaded slowly, each second feeling like an eternity. And then, there she was. Lisa was sitting on a couch laughing. She looked happy. Too happy. The kind of carefree joy I hadn't seen in her in years. A man's voice came from off-screen, low and smooth, teasing her about something. She swatted playfully at the air and said, "Stop it. You're going to ruin my concentration." Concentration? For what? The camera panned slightly, revealing the man. He was tall, dark-haired, and annoyingly handsome in that artsy, torture genius kind of way. I recognized him instantly. It was Victor Monroe. Victor was a big name in the art world. He painted these massive, abstract pieces that sold for tens of thousands of dollars. Lisa had mentioned him before, during her trip to New York. He'd been at the exhibition, and she'd gushed about how inspiring his work was. Inspiring. I thought bitterly. Yeah, clearly. The video went on, showing them talking, laughing, and then my stomach flipped. They kissed. Not a quick, spur-of-the-moment kiss either. This was passionate, intimate, like they'd done it 100 times before. And then it got worse. The scene shifted, and suddenly, they weren't just sitting on the couch anymore. I won't go into detail, but let's just say it was explicit. Very explicit. And the worst part? The man, Victor, was the one filming it. He narrated parts of it, his voice full of smug confidence. He said things like, "This is going to drive them crazy, and you're natural in front of the camera." It hit me like a brick to the face. This wasn't some private video that accidentally got leaked. Lisa had done this willingly, knowingly. She'd let herself be filmed, let him upload it, all for the world to see. By the time the video ended, I was shaking. My entire body felt like it had been dunked in ice water. What the hell had I just watched? I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the blank screen, trying to process what I'd seen. Was this why she'd been so secretive lately? Why she'd been locking her devices and sneaking off for hours at a time? Had this been going on for months? I thought about the searches on her phone. Discreet hotels NYC, private chat apps, and the one that stuck with me the most, how to cover your tracks in an affair. She knew what she was doing. This wasn't some fling, some mistake she'd gotten caught up in. This was calculated. She'd planned this. And I wasn't just angry, I was humiliated. Not only had my wife cheated on me, but now there was video evidence of it floating around online for anyone to stumble across. I wanted to smash something, to scream, to do anything to release the boiling rage inside me. But instead, I just sat there, silent, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Lisa had always said she wanted to be remembered for her art. Well, she was about to get her wish. I didn't know what to do with myself after watching that video. My mind raced with questions I didn't want the answers to. How long had this been going on? Was I the fool everyone else already knew about? And, most importantly, why? Why would Lisa risk everything? Our marriage, her reputation, for some flashy artist with a nice smile and a camera. The humiliation of it all was unbearable. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the fact that Victor had posted it online, as if my pain was entertainment for strangers. As if my wife was some kind of exhibition. I couldn't keep it bottled up anymore. I needed answers. I needed to confront Lisa. When she came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the kitchen, sitting at the table with her laptop in front of me. My hands were clasped together, knuckles white. She walked in, humming to herself, carrying a bag of groceries like everything was fine. "Hey, babe," she said, setting the bag down on the counter. "What's for dinner?" I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her, studied her, the way she moved, the way she smiled, like she didn't have a care in the world. "Nick," she said, finally noticing the tension in the room. Her smile faded, replaced with a cautious expression. "What's wrong?" I reached over and opened her laptop, spinning it around to face her. The screen displayed the page I'd been staring at all day. The video paused at the beginning, with her smiling face frozen in time. Her reaction was immediate. She flinched like I'd just slapped her. Her eyes widened, and her face drained of color. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. "Explain this," I said, my voice cold and steady. Lisa's hands flew to her mouth. "Nick, don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't you dare lie to me. I want the truth. All of it. Right now." She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. But there was none. "It's not what it looks like," she finally said, her voice trembling. I laughed, but it was bitter and hollow. "Not what it looks like." "Lisa, I watched the whole thing. I know what it is. Don't insult me by pretending it's anything else." She started crying, big dramatic sobs that felt more like a performance than genuine remorse. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she wailed. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I repeated, my anger boiling over. "You don't accidentally let some guy film you and post it online, Lisa. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was deliberate. You planned it. You hid it. And now it's out there for the whole world to see." She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know he was going to post it," she mumbled between sobs. "Oh, so that makes it better?" I snapped. "You still cheated on me. You still lied to me. Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just destroy our marriage. You've ruined your reputation, your career. Who's going to take you seriously as an artist now, Lisa? You've turned yourself into a joke." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. I was too angry to care. "I thought we were happy," I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. "I thought we were building something real together. And now I find out you've been sneaking around behind my back with some pretentious wannabe Picasso? What the hell, Lisa?" She finally looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "I just wanted to know his secret," she whispered. I blinked. "What?" "Victor," she said, her voice shaking. "He's so successful, Nick. Everyone in the art world admires him. I thought if I got close to him, if I could learn from him, maybe I'd finally make it too." "Learn from him?" I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "So what, Lisa? You thought sleeping with him would unlock some magical secret to success? Did he promise to sprinkle some artistic fairy dust on you?" She didn't answer. She just sat there, her shoulders slumped, looking utterly defeated. For a moment, the room was silent except for her quiet sobs. I stared at her, the woman I'd loved for 10 years, and felt like I didn't even know her anymore. Finally, I stood up, pushing the chair back with a screech. "I need some air," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Nick, please," she begged, reaching out toward me. But I didn't stop. I walked out the door, slamming it behind me. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it didn't clear my head. Nothing could. All I knew was that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot, that I spent the night driving aimlessly, trying to make sense of everything. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached, but the pain was grounding. Lisa's voice kept echoing in my head. I just wanted to know his secret. Her secret? What kind of person trades their dignity, their marriage, for a shot at some abstract notion of success? But it wasn't just Lisa. Victor Monroe wasn't some innocent bystander in all of this. He'd orchestrated it, filmed it, posted it online, and no doubt moved on to his next protege. The thought made my blood boil. Lisa might have been foolish, but this guy? He was a predator, using his reputation to lure people in and destroy lives. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the house was dark. Lisa was still awake. I could see her shadow pacing in the living room. I didn't go in. I couldn't face her yet. Instead, I sat in the car and pulled out my phone. If Victor thought he could get away with this, he had another thing coming. I searched his name on every platform I could think of, social media, art blogs, forums. It didn't take long to find him. His Instagram alone was a goldmine of self-obsession. Photos of his studio, his paintings, and, of course, himself. But it wasn't the photos that caught my attention. It was the captions. Victor loved to brag. One post from about 2 months ago showed him at the same New York exhibition Lisa had attended. The caption read, "New city, new opportunities. Some people will do anything to learn from the master." The comment section was full of sycophants praising his work, but a few comments stood out. They were vague, but they hinted at rumors about Victor's mentorship methods. One said, "You always find the prettiest students, don't you?" Another joked, "Victor's secrets are worth any price." I scrolled further and found another post, this one from just last week. It showed a painting in progress, with Victor standing in the background, holding a glass of wine. The caption read, "Inspiration strikes in the unlikeliest of places. Keep your eyes open and your doors unlocked." Doors unlocked? My stomach churned. Was he referring to Lisa? Or someone else? I kept digging, searching for anything that could give me more insight into who this guy really was. That's when I stumbled across an article about him on an art gossip site. Most of it was the usual fluff about his talent and rise to fame, but one paragraph stopped me cold. It mentioned a controversy from a few years back, an anonymous accusation from a former mentee who claimed Victor had pressured her into a relationship in exchange for connections in the art world. The accusation never went anywhere, but it painted a picture of a man who thrived on manipulation. And now, he'd added Lisa to his list of conquests. By the time I finally went inside, the sun was starting to rise. Lisa was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and tear-streaked. She looked up when I walked in, but I didn't say a word. I went straight to the bedroom and shut the door. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Instead, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, formulating a plan. Victor Monroe wasn't going to get away with this. And neither was Lisa. That I woke up with one thing on my mind: revenge. Lisa's betrayal had been like a knife to the gut. But the more I thought about Victor Monroe, the more the knife twisted. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about power, manipulation, and the way this guy had used my wife as a pawn in his sick game. I spent the morning avoiding Lisa. She lingered around the house, trying to talk to me, but every time she opened her mouth, I felt a fresh wave of anger rising in my chest. I wasn't ready to hear her excuses. Not yet. Instead, I focused on gathering my resources. I started by digging through every email, text, and photo I could find on Lisa's laptop. At this point, I didn't care if it was invasive. She'd forfeited her right to privacy the second she decided to cheat. What I found didn't surprise me, but it still made my stomach churn. There were dozens of messages between Lisa and Victor, dating back months. At first, they seemed innocent, discussions about art techniques, critiques of her work, but it didn't take long for things to escalate. "I can tell you're different," one message from Victor read. "You've got potential most people don't. If you want to break into the big leagues, you'll need to get closer to someone who understands how it works." Another one, a few days later, was even more blatant. "Your art is beautiful, but raw. If you want to refine it, you'll need to push yourself further. Sometimes that means stepping outside your comfort zone. Trust me, I can help you." It was textbook manipulation. He dangled the idea of success in front of her, made her feel special, then slowly reeled her in. As I scrolled further, the messages got more personal. Compliments about her looks, flirty emojis, hints at late-night conversations that veered far from art. It was disgusting. Then I found a smoking gun, a series of photos Victor had sent her. They weren't explicit, but they were intimate. Selfies of him shirtless in his studio, holding a glass of wine, with captions like, "Thinking of you while I paint." I downloaded everything. Next, I looked into the site where Victor had uploaded the video. I found his profile easily. It was public, with dozens of videos featuring other women, all tagged with artsy titles like The Muse or Creative Chaos. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. Victor wasn't just an artist. He was a predator, using his status to lure women in, then broadcasting his conquest for the world to see. I felt sick, but I also felt determined. By the time Lisa tentatively approached me that evening, I had a plan. She stood in the doorway of the bedroom, clutching a cup of tea like it was a shield. "Nick," she said softly, "can we talk?" I stared at her for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I nodded. "Fine, talk." She stepped inside, setting the tea down on the nightstand. "I know I've hurt you," she began, her voice trembling. "I know what I did was wrong, and I hate myself for it. But you have to understand, it wasn't about you. It was about me, about my career. Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "Don't give me the 'it wasn't about you' speech. You cheated Lisa. You lied to me. And now, there's a video of you online, with him, for everyone to see. You don't get to justify this." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't know he'd post it," she whispered. "He told me it was just for us, for inspiration." I laughed bitterly. Inspiration? Is that what we're calling it now? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you were being used, Lisa. And you let him. She flinched, but I wasn't done. "I've seen the other videos, the ones he's posted with other women." I continued. "Did you think you were special? That he only did this with you? He's been running this scam for years, using his status to prey on people like you. And you fell for it." Her face crumpled, and she sank onto the bed, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know," she sobbed. I thought he cared." "Well, he didn't," I snapped. "And now, thanks to you, I'm dragged into this mess too." For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of everything hanging heavy in the air. Then I stood up and grabbed my jacket. "Where are you going?" Lisa asked, her voice small. "To fix this," I said simply. Her brow furrowed. "Fix it? How?" "You'll see," I said, turning to leave. And as I walked out the door, I knew exactly where I was headed. It was time to confront Victor Monroe, that I didn't hesitate. The moment I walked out the door, I punched Victor's address into my GPS. It wasn't hard to find. He wasn't exactly a private person. His social media was practically a roadmap to his life, full of geotags and photos of his loft studio in the city. The drive was a blur. My knuckles were white against the steering wheel, my mind replaying everything I'd seen and heard over the past few days. The lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. Each thought fueled the fire burning inside me. By the time I pulled up to Victor's building, it was late. His studio was on the top floor, with massive windows that glowed faintly in the night. I could see shadows moving inside, the flicker of candlelight, and the faint hum of music drifting down to the street. Of course, Victor Monroe, the self-proclaimed tortured artist, working late into the night. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, my pulse pounding in my ears. By the time I reached his door, I was practically vibrating with adrenaline. I didn't bother knocking. The door was slightly ajar. Typical Victor, too arrogant to worry about things like security, so I shoved it open and stepped inside. Victor was standing near a canvas, his back to me. He was shirtless, a wine glass in one hand, a brush in the other. He turned when he heard me, his expression shifting from surprise to amusement in a matter of seconds. "Well," he said, setting the brush down. "I wasn't expecting company." "Cut the act," I snapped, stepping closer. "You know exactly who I am." Recognition flickered in his eyes, but he didn't lose that smug grin. "Ah, you must be Nick, Lisa's husband." He sipped his wine, as if this was some kind of social call. I was wondering when you'd show up. His nonchalance sent my anger skyrocketing. You think this is funny? I growled. You think you can mess with people's lives and just walk away? Victor chuckled, setting his glass down on a nearby table. Mess with people's lives? Nick, your wife came to me. She wanted my help, my guidance. She made her choices. Don't blame me because she got bored of playing house. I took a step closer, fists clenched at my sides. You manipulated her, I said through gritted teeth. You knew exactly what you were doing. You prey on women like her, use them, and toss them aside. And then you broadcast it to the world like it's some kind of trophy. Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly unbothered by my accusations. Broadcast? Oh, you must mean the video. He smirked, leaning casually against the table. Relax, Nick. It's art. If you can't handle that, maybe you're the one who doesn't belong in her world. The sheer arrogance of this guy made my blood boil. You think this is art? I said, my voice rising. This isn't art. It's exploitation, and I'm not letting you get away with it. Victor straightened, his smirk fading slightly. And what exactly are you planning to do about it? He asked, his tone dripping with condescension. Come in here, throw a few punches, and call it a day? Trust me, that won't change anything. Oh, I'm not here to punch you, I said, my voice cold. I'm here to destroy you. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. I've got everything I need, Victor, I said, my voice steady. The texts, the emails, the photos, the video. And not just with Lisa, with all the other women you've done this to. You've left a trail, and I've followed it. Victor's smirk returned, but it was weaker this time. You can't prove anything, he said, though there was an edge of doubt in his voice. Maybe not in court, I admitted. But I don't need to. I've already drafted an email to every major art gallery, every critic, every sponsor you've ever worked with. All it takes is one click, and your career is over. Victor's face darkened, the confident mask slipping. You wouldn't, he said, his voice low. Try me, I shot back. For a moment, we stood there, locked in a silent standoff. The air was thick with tension, the faint hum of music the only sound in the room. Finally, Victor laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Fine, he said, throwing up his hands. You win, Nick. I'll take the video down. Is that what you want? It's a start, I said. But it's not enough. You're going to publicly apologize to every woman you've exploited. And then you're going to disappear. No more art shows, no more interviews, no more mentorships. You're done. Victor stared at me, his jaw tight. You're ruining me, he said quietly. No, I replied, turning to leave. You ruined yourself. As I walked out the door, I felt a strange sense of relief. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was back in control. Victor Monroe had built his career on lies and manipulation. But now he was about to watch it all come crashing down. That I drove home that night feeling like I won a battle, but the war was far from over. Victor had agreed to take the video down, but it wasn't enough to undo the damage he and Lisa had done. A part of me hoped that taking him down would feel satisfying, but all it did was leave me hollow. When I walked into the house, Lisa was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was a mess, her eyes puffy and red. She opened her mouth to say something, but I cut her off. Don't, I said, holding up a hand. I don't want to hear it. Her lips quivered, and she clasped her hands in front of her. Did you go see him? Yeah, I said, dropping my keys on the counter. I went to see him, told him to take the video down, told him he's finished. She flinched, looking down at the floor. Nick, I'm not done. I interrupted, my voice cold. You think this ends with him? It doesn't. He's not the only one who ruined this marriage, Lisa. You had a choice. You knew what you were doing every step of the way, and you did it anyway. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she stepped closer. I know, she whispered. I know I hurt you, Nick, and I'll never forgive myself for what I've done. But please tell me there's still a chance for us to fix this. I stared at her, searching her face for something. Remorse, sincerity, a shred of the woman I thought I married. And maybe it was there, buried under the layers of guilt and shame. But it didn't matter. Fix this, I repeated, laughing bitterly. Lisa, There's nothing left to fix. You didn't just cheat on me. You betrayed me, humiliated me, and threw away everything we built for a shot at fame. And for what? A guy who doesn't give a damn about you." She sobbed, clutching the edge of the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. "I was stupid," she cried. "I was desperate. I thought he could help me, that he could make me feel like I was worth something." "You were worth something," I snapped. "To me. To us. But you threw it away for him." The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa wiped at her face, sniffling, and I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't stay here. Not right now." Her eyes widened in panic. "Nick, no," she said, stepping toward me. "Please don't leave. We can work through this. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes." But I shook my head. "You should have thought about that before," I said, grabbing my jacket. "I need space, Lisa. Don't call me. Don't text me. Just let me figure this out." I left before she could say anything else, slamming the door behind me. For the next few days, I stayed with my brother, Mike. He didn't pry, he didn't need to. He could tell something was wrong, and when I finally told him everything, he listened without judgment. "Man," he said, shaking his head, "I can't even imagine what you're going through. But you know you don't have to go through it alone, right?" "I don't know what to do, Mike," I admitted, burying my face in my hands. "I thought I could handle this, but every time I think about her, about what she did, it's like I'm reliving it all over again." Mike clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Look, whatever you decide, whether you try to work it out or walk away, I've got your back. But don't rush it. Take the time you need to figure out what's best for you." His words stuck with me as the days turned into weeks. I spent that time reflecting, trying to piece together the broken shards of my life. I met with a lawyer to explore my options, started therapy to work through the anger and betrayal, and focused on rebuilding my sense of self. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape the memories. Lisa's laugh, her smile, the way she used to look at me like I was the only person in the world. And now, the way she looked at Victor. It was a reminder that nothing would ever be the same. One night, as I lay in bed at Mike's place, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Lisa. "I know you said not to contact you," it read, "but I need you to know that I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove it." I stared at the screen, my heart a mess of emotions I couldn't untangle. Part of me wanted to believe her, to give her the chance to make things right. But the other part of me, the part that replayed that video, that remembered the lies, knew it might already be too late, that I didn't reply to Lisa's text. What could I say? That I loved her, but couldn't forgive her? That I wanted to believe her, but the thought of what she'd done with Victor was burned into my mind? I needed space, and no amount of her promises or apologies would change that. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing again, but this time it wasn't Lisa. It was a coworker. "Hey man, are you okay?" his text read. I frowned, my stomach twisting. Why is he asking me that? Before I could reply, another text came through, this time from an old college friend. "Nick, I just saw something online. Is everything okay with you and Lisa?" My heart dropped. I immediately opened my browser and typed Victor Monroe's name into the search bar. The top result wasn't one of his art pieces or an article praising his work. It was a blog post. The headline made my blood run cold. "Art World Scandal, Victor Monroe's Secret Life Exposed." I clicked on it, my hands trembling. The blog detailed everything. Victor's pattern of manipulating women, the videos he'd posted online, and even his relationship with Lisa. It didn't mention her name, thank God, but it was clear enough to anyone who knew us. The article wasn't just a casual takedown. It was thorough, with screenshots of Victor's messages, links to his videos, and testimonies from other women who'd fallen victim to his schemes. Someone had done their homework, and at the very bottom of the post, there was the email I'd sent to the galleries and critics. My chest tightened. This was my doing. I'd started this. Victor wasn't just a scandal now. He was a pariah. The comments on the blog were brutal. People were calling for boycotts of his work, demanding galleries drop him, even speculating about criminal charges. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. Victor deserved everything coming his way. But another part of me felt exposed. If this blog had gotten hold of my email, how long before the connection to Lisa came out? Before I could spiral further, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Lisa. "Nick," her message read, "We need to talk. Please call me." I ignored it. Instead, I checked social media, searching for any mention of her. My hands shook as I scrolled through posts, but thankfully, her name hadn't surfaced yet. But it was only a matter of time. Victor's downfall wasn't going to stay contained. The art world loved nothing more than a good scandal, and this one was about to blow up. Sure enough, by noon, news outlets had picked up the story. Articles with headlines like "Art Star" or "Predator." The shocking truth about Victor Monroe were everywhere. His Instagram account was flooded with comments, some defending him, but most tearing him apart. I couldn't help but wonder what Victor was doing now. Was he panicking? Laughing it off? Plotting his next move? But more than that, I wondered what Lisa was doing. Was she watching her world crumble the way mine had when I found that video? I got my answer that evening when she showed up at Mike's house. I heard the knock at the door and froze. Mike looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "You expecting someone?" Before I could answer, the knock came again, louder this time. I got up reluctantly and opened the door to find Lisa standing there, her face pale and her eyes bloodshot. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Nick," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, glancing back at Mike. He gave me a small nod and retreated to the kitchen, giving us some privacy. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "What do you want, Lisa?" I asked, my tone flat. She wrapped her arms around herself, her body shaking. "I saw the articles," she said. "About Victor. Did you do this?" I met her eyes, unflinching. "Yeah," I said. "I did." Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. "Why?" she whispered. "Why?" I repeated, incredulous. "Because someone had to. Because he's a predator, Lisa. And because you were too blind or too selfish to see it." Her lip trembled, and she looked down at the ground. "You don't understand," she said. "I was desperate. He made me feel like I had a chance, like I could finally be someone. I wasn't thinking straight." "Clearly," I snapped. "And now look where it's gotten you." Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel the usual pang of guilt. "Not this time." "Do they know?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "About me?" "Not yet," I said. "But it's only a matter of time." Her face crumpled, and she covered her mouth with her hands, stifling a sob. "What do I do, Nick? How do I fix this?" "You can't," I said, my voice harsh. "You made your bed, Lisa. Now you have to lie in it." She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "What about us?" I stared at her, my heart aching despite everything. "I don't know," I admitted. "But right now, there's no us." And with that, I turned and walked back inside, leaving her standing alone in the cold. The next few days were chaos. Victor Monroe's scandal spread like wildfire. Major news outlets picked up the story, and social media was buzzing with outrage. His galleries canceled shows, sponsors cut ties, and art critics who once praised him were now tearing him to shreds. But the fallout didn't stop with Victor. Lisa's connection to him was starting to surface. People in the local art community were putting the pieces together. A photo of her and Victor at the New York exhibition made its way into a discussion thread online. The caption was innocuous, but the comments weren't. "Isn't this the woman in that leaked video?" one comment read. "I heard she's a student of his," another said, complete with a snide emoji. By the end of the week, whispers had turned into outright accusations. Lisa hadn't just damaged her reputation, she'd torched it. She called me again, but I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to face her, especially not now. Then came a knock at the door. It was late, almost midnight. Mike had already gone to bed, but I was still awake, staring blankly at the TV. My gut told me who it was before I even opened the door. Lisa stood on the porch, drenched from the rain, clutching a soaked purse. She looked completely shattered, her makeup smeared, her hair a mess, and her eyes red from crying. "Nick," she said, her voice cracking. "Please." I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. Lisa, it's late. What do you want? Her lip quivered, and she looked down at the ground. They know, she whispered. Everyone knows. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. I've been getting messages, she said, her voice barely audible. Emails. Texts. People are saying horrible things, Nick. They're calling me names, threatening me. I can't. I don't know what to do. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. What did you expect, Lisa? You made choices. This is the fallout. She looked up at me, desperation written all over her face. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. I thought I could fix it. I shook my head. Fix it? Lisa, there's no fixing this. You let yourself get pulled into Victor's world, and now you're paying the price. What did you think would happen when you let him film you? Did you think no one would ever find out? I was stupid, she cried, clutching her purse tighter. I was selfish. I know that now. But I'm begging you, Nick. Please help me. I can't do this alone. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face, to let her deal with the mess she'd created on her own. But another part of me, a quieter, more conflicted part, remembered the woman I'd loved for 10 years. I took a deep breath, running a hand through my hair. You want my help? I asked, my voice steady. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Then start by telling the truth, I said. All of it. No more lies. No more half-truths. If you want a shot at fixing your life, you need to own up to what you've done. Publicly. Her eyes widened. You mean a statement? Exactly, I said. Admit what happened. Apologize to the people you've hurt. And don't try to spin it into some sob story about being manipulated. Take responsibility, Lisa. It's the only way you're going to get through this. She hesitated, her hands trembling. What if it doesn't work? I shrugged. Then at least you'll know you tried. For a moment, she just stood there, the rain dripping from her hair onto the porch. Finally, she nodded. Okay, she whispered. I'll do it. I stepped back, letting her inside. You can write it here, I said, gesturing toward the kitchen table. But I'm warning you, Lisa. This doesn't mean I've forgiven you. This is about doing the right thing, not about saving us. Her face crumpled, but she nodded again, silently taking a seat at the table. As she began typing on her phone, I leaned against the counter, watching her. Part of me hated that I was helping her, hated that I couldn't just walk away and leave her to deal with the consequences of her actions. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the woman she used to be, hoped this could be a step towards something better. For her. And maybe someday for me too. Lisa stayed up all night crafting her statement. I stayed in the background, leaning against the kitchen counter, silently watching as she typed furiously on her phone. Every now and then, she'd stop, delete a few lines, and start over, muttering to herself. By the time she was done, the first rays of sunlight were peeking through the windows. She looked exhausted, her fingers trembling as she held out her phone to me. Here, she said quietly. Can you read it before I post it? I hesitated before taking the phone. Part of me didn't even want to help her with this. She'd put herself in this mess, and I didn't owe her a thing. But against my better judgment, I read it. Her statement was raw and honest. She admitted to the affair, to her role in Victor's manipulative schemes, and even to allowing herself to be filmed. She apologized to the people she'd hurt, to me, to her colleagues in the art world, and to anyone who had been affected by Victor's behavior. I was blinded by ambition, one line read. I thought I could trade my dignity for success, but I lost more than I ever imagined. To my husband, who didn't deserve any of this. I'm sorry. I can't undo what I've done, but I hope you'll one day find it in your heart to forgive me. I swallowed hard as I finished reading. It was the closest thing to an admission of guilt I'd ever seen from her. It's good, I said finally, handing the phone back to her. But it's not going to fix everything. I know, she whispered, staring down at the screen. But it's a start. She posted it, and the fallout was immediate. Within hours, her statement was circulating online. Some people praised her for owning up to her mistakes, but most weren't so kind. The comments were brutal. Accusations of being a willing accomplice, of ruining other people's lives for her own selfish gain. Some even mocked her for staying quiet until she had no choice but to speak up. But the worst part? The people who figured out who I was. Someone connected the dots between her statement and Victor's scandal, and soon enough, my name was being dragged into the conversation. People speculated about our marriage, about how I'd allowed her to get involved with someone like Victor. Maybe her husband wasn't paying attention to her, one comment read. Another said, if I were married to a guy who couldn't see this coming, I'd cheat too. It was like the humiliation had been amplified tenfold. Not only was I the victim of her betrayal, but now I was being blamed for it. Lisa tried to call me later that afternoon. I ignored her. I needed space, needed to process everything without her voice clouding my judgment. I spent the next few days avoiding social media, ignoring my phone, and throwing myself into work. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, the weight of it all pressed down on me. One night, while I was lying awake in bed at Mike's place, my phone buzzed. I groaned, reaching for it, assuming it was another reporter trying to dig into my personal life. But it wasn't. It was Victor. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. His message was short, almost dismissive. Nice move, Nick. You've made your point. Now let's see how far you're willing to take this. Rage coursed through me. The audacity of this guy to message me as if he still had the upper hand. I didn't reply, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. What did he mean by, how far you're willing to take this? Was he planning something? Trying to turn the narrative back in his favor? The next morning, I called Lisa. Did Victor contact you? I asked the moment she picked up. She hesitated. Know why? Did he contact you? Yeah, I said, pacing the living room. He sent me some cryptic message about me making my point. I don't know what he's up to, but I don't trust him. Lisa's voice trembled. Nick, I'm scared. What if he tries to retaliate? Then you better be ready, I said coldly. Because whatever he does, you're tied to him now. And I'm not taking the fall for either of you. For a moment, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then, softly, she said, I never meant for it to get this bad. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Yeah, well, it did, I said. And now we all have to live with it. I hung up before she could respond. This wasn't over. I could feel it. Victor wasn't the type to go down quietly. And whatever his next move was, I knew it was going to be big. That it didn't take long for Victor to strike back. 2 days after he sent me that cryptic message, the art world was hit with another wave of scandal. But this time, it wasn't just about him. I woke up to a dozen missed calls from Lisa and a string of panic texts. Nick, he's not done. Check the news. He's dragging me into it. Please call me. I don't know what to do. I groaned, rubbing my eyes and opened my browser. Sure enough, Victor Monroe was trending again, but this time, so was Lisa's name. He'd done an exclusive interview with some edgy online publication, claiming he was the victim of a coordinated attack meant to destroy his reputation. He didn't name me directly, but he implied that Lisa and I had conspired to ruin him after their consensual relationship ended. I trusted her, Victor said in the interview, playing the wounded artist to perfection. She told me she wanted to grow as an artist, and I believed in her. But when things didn't go the way she wanted, she turned against me. Now I'm being vilified, but the truth is, we were both consenting adults. The article also included screenshots of messages between him and Lisa, ones he'd cherry-picked to make it look like she was the one pursuing him. In the headline, Victor Monroe fights back. The truth about his muse. It was a disaster. The comment sections were already filling up with people debating who was really to blame. Some were furious at Victor, calling him a predator. But others? They were siding with him. She knew what she was doing, one commenter wrote. She just regrets it now, because she got caught. Another said this guy is being crucified for a consensual relationship. Cancel culture at its finest. I slammed my laptop shut, the rage bubbling up inside me. Victor wasn't just trying to save his own skin. He was dragging Lisa down with him. My phone buzzed again. It was Lisa calling for the 4th time that morning. Against my better judgment, I picked up. Nick, she said, her voice shaky. You've seen it, haven't you? Yeah, I've seen it, I snapped. He's throwing you under the bus, Lisa. What did you expect? She let out a choked sob. I didn't think he'd go this far. He's making it look like it was all my fault. Maybe because it partly was I shot back. You gave him the ammunition. You let him manipulate you. And now he's twisting the knife. Her sobs grew louder, and I felt a pang of guilt. But I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford to feel sorry for her. Not now. What do I do? She asked, her voice desperate. You own it, I said firmly. You've already admitted to your part in this. Stick to the truth. Don't let him bait you into a public fight, because that's exactly what he wants. He's trying to drag you down with him, so he doesn't fall alone. But what if people believe him? She whispered. Some will, I said bluntly. You can't control that. But the people who matter, the ones who know the full story, they'll see through his lies. You just have to hold your ground. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her trying to steady her breathing. Do you think he'll stop? I hesitated. No, I admitted. Not until he's burned every bridge he has left. But the more he lashes out, the more desperate he looks. He's only making himself look worse. Lisa didn't respond right away, and I could tell she was trying to process everything. Finally, she said, Thank you, Nick, for answering, for helping me. Don't thank me, I said coldly. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because he deserves to go down. And because, like it or not, you're tied to this now. If you go down, he gets to play the victim. And I'm not letting that happen. I hung up before she could say anything else. Over the next few days, Victor kept pushing his narrative. He did more interviews, posted cryptic messages on social media, and even hinted at releasing more proof of his relationships. It was clear he was flailing, trying to shift the blame onto anyone but himself. But the tide was turning. More women came forward, sharing their stories about Victor. They described the same patterns of manipulation, the same promises of mentorship that turned into something darker. One woman even shared a recording of a conversation she'd had with him, where he blatantly admitted to using his muses as inspiration for both his art and his personal indulgences. It was damning. Victor had tried to control the narrative, but his house of cards was collapsing around him. As for Lisa, she stayed quiet, just like I told her to. Her statement was enough for most people to see that she wasn't the real villain in this story. She'd made mistakes, big ones, but Victor was the one pulling the strings. And slowly, the public started to turn on him. But as his downfall played out in real time, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. Victor wasn't the type to admit defeat, and I knew he had one last move up his sleeve. I just didn't know what it was. Just as the storm seemed to be dying down, Victor made his final, desperate move, and it hit like a bomb. I woke up one morning to my phone vibrating relentlessly. Missed calls, texts, notifications. The chaos on my screen told me one thing. Victor had done something big. When I opened my browser, the headline stared back at me like a punch to the gut. Exclusive video leak. Victor Monroe speaks out. My heart sank. I clicked on the link, dreading what I was about to see. The video was filmed in his studio, the same one where he'd lured Lisa and countless others. Victor sat in front of a half-finished canvas, his hair disheveled, his expression serious. This wasn't the smug, untouchable Victor I'd seen in interviews. This was someone who looked like he'd lost everything and was determined to drag everyone else down with him. I've stayed silent about a lot of things, he began, his voice low and somber. But I can't do that anymore. It's time the truth came out. About me, about the people who've tried to destroy me, and about the lies they've told to cover their own mistakes. He launched into a tirade, rehashing the same garbage he'd spewed in his interviews. How he was the real victim, how Lisa and I had conspired to ruin him. But then he dropped the bombshell. I have proof, he said, leaning forward, his eyes locking with the camera. Proof that Lisa wasn't just a willing participant. She was the one who started it. She pursued me. She begged me to mentor her, to take her under my wing. And when things got complicated, she turned against me. The screen cut to a series of screenshots, text messages, emails, even snippets of video chats. At first glance, they seemed to back up his story. The messages showed Lisa complimenting his work, asking to meet, saying she was willing to do whatever it takes to learn from him. The implication was clear. Lisa had been chasing him, not the other way around. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. I knew Victor was manipulative, but this was something else entirely. He was rewriting the narrative, framing Lisa as the aggressor and himself as the misunderstood genius caught in her web. The video ended with Victor staring directly into the camera. To Nick, he said, his voice dripping with fake sympathy, "I'm sorry you've been dragged into this. But maybe now you'll see the truth about the person you've been defending. Maybe you'll finally understand who the real villain is." I slammed my laptop shut, my blood boiling. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. Social media exploded with debates about the video. Some people saw through Victor's tactics, calling him out for trying to shift the blame. But others? They latched onto his version of events, twisting the narrative to make Lisa look like the mastermind behind it all. Lisa called me within an hour of the video going live. "Nick," she said, her voice frantic. "You've seen it, haven't you?" "Yeah, I've seen it," I said, pacing the living room. "And now the whole world thinks you're the one who orchestrated this mess." She let out a shaky breath. "He's lying, Nick. You know that, right? Those messages, he's twisting them. He's leaving out the parts where he manipulated me, where he pushed me into things. You believe me, don't you?" I hesitated, my mind racing. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that Victor was just playing his usual games, using selective evidence to paint himself as the victim. But the damage was already done. "Lisa," I said finally, "whether I believe you or not doesn't matter right now. What matters is how you're going to respond to this." "I don't know how," she admitted, her voice breaking. "If I say anything, it'll just make it worse. He's already got people thinking I'm the villain." "Then you need to fight back," I said firmly. "Don't let him control the narrative. Tell the whole truth, Lisa, everything, even the parts that make you look bad. The only way to beat him is to be honest." She was silent for a moment. "You really think anyone will believe me?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know," I admitted. "But you don't have a choice. Either you let him win, or you take your shot." Later that day, Lisa released another statement. This time she didn't hold back. She detailed every interaction she'd had with Victor, including the parts she'd left out before. The initial messages where she reached out to him, the flattery, the desperation. But she also included the parts Victor had conveniently omitted, the pressure he'd put on her, the promises he'd made, and the way he'd slowly turned their mentorship into something far darker. She ended the statement with one simple line: "I take full responsibility for my choices, but Victor Monroe is not the victim he claims to be." The response was mixed. Some people praised her for being honest, for owning up to her mistakes while still calling out Victor's manipulation. Others doubled down on their criticism, claiming she was only speaking out now because she'd been backed into a corner. But for the first time in weeks, Lisa seemed calmer. She'd told the truth, the whole truth, and now it was out of her hands. As for me, I couldn't shake the feeling that Victor still had one last card to play. And whatever it was, I knew it was going to hit hard. Victor didn't disappoint. Just when I thought the chaos couldn't get worse, he escalated in a way that blindsided everyone. It started with an anonymous email that landed in my inbox. The subject line was simple: "Thought you should see this." I hesitated for a moment before clicking it. The message contained a single link to a private video hosting site. Below, it was a short note: "You think you know the whole story, but you don't. Let's see how much of the truth you can handle." My stomach churned. I knew it had to be from Victor. I debated not clicking the link. Part of me wanted to delete the email and walk away, but I couldn't. Curiosity, dread, and anger compelled me to see what he was trying to pull this time. The video was shaky, obviously filmed with a handheld camera. It started with Victor in his studio, but this wasn't the polished, controlled version of him I'd seen before. He looked disheveled, unshaven, his eyes bloodshot. He smiled weakly at the camera. "Well, I guess this is where we've landed," he said, his voice low and almost amused. "You've all heard their version of the story, Lisa's, Nick's. But I think it's time we set the record straight, don't you?" The camera panned to a laptop on the table, where a video was queued up. He clicked play, and suddenly, the screen filled with a scene that made my blood run cold. It was footage from his studio. Lisa was there, sitting on the infamous couch. She looked nervous, fiddling with her hands, while Victor stood in front of her, talking animatedly. The audio wasn't great, but it was clear enough. "You've got talent," Victor said, his voice dripping with charm. "But talent alone isn't enough. You need someone who can open doors for you, someone who understands how the game is played. Lisa nodded, her voice barely audible. I just want to be taken seriously. I've been trying for years, but no one gives me a chance. Victor leaned closer, his tone soft but calculated. Then let me help you. But you have to trust me. You have to be willing to do what it takes. Not everyone has what it takes to make it, Lisa. But I think you do. The footage cut abruptly, shifting to another clip. This time, Lisa was laughing, holding a glass of wine. Victor was behind the camera, filming her. You're going to be a star, he said, his voice smug. You just have to stop second-guessing yourself. I know what's best for you. The clips kept coming, each one more damning than the last. Victor had carefully edited them to paint Lisa as a willing participant in his schemes, someone who'd actively pursued him, laughed at his jokes, and let herself be swept into his world. The final clip was the worst. It showed Lisa sitting on the couch again, but this time, the conversation had taken a darker turn. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice shaky. Victor didn't hesitate. If you want to make it, Lisa, this is the way. Trust me, you'll thank me later. The screen faded to black, and Victor's face appeared again. Well, there you have it, he said, spreading his arms theatrically. The truth. Make of it what you will. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. The video was a masterpiece of manipulation, cut and spliced to make Lisa look like the villain, like she'd been in control the whole time. Victor had framed it perfectly, leaving just enough room for doubt to creep in. It didn't take long for the video to surface online. By the end of the day, it was everywhere. People were tearing Lisa apart, calling her a liar, a manipulator, a willing accomplice in Victor's schemes. The support she'd started to regain evaporated almost instantly. My phone buzzed nonstop. Texts from friends, colleagues, even my family, all asking if I'd seen it, if I knew the real story. And then, of course, Lisa called. Nick, she sobbed, her voice barely coherent. You saw it, didn't you? You saw what he did. Yeah, I saw it, I said, my tone colder than I intended. You believe me, don't you? She pleaded. You know he twisted everything. Those videos, he took them out of context. He's trying to destroy me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. Lisa, I know he's manipulative. I know he's doing everything he can to save himself. But you gave him the material. You gave him the opportunity to twist the knife. Her sobs grew louder. I was stupid. I thought he was helping me. I didn't realize he was recording me the whole time. Yeah, well, now the whole world's seen it, I said bitterly. And they're not going to care about the context. They're going to believe what they want to believe. What do I do? She whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't have an answer for her. Victor had played his final card, and it had worked. He'd successfully turned the narrative in his favor, leaving Lisa to take the brunt of the fallout. And as much as I hated him for it, I couldn't ignore the part of me that was furious at her, too. She'd let herself get caught in his web. She'd let herself believe his lies. And now, we were both paying the price. The days that followed Victor's video were an unrelenting storm. Everywhere I turned, his twisted narrative dominated the conversation. Lisa's name was dragged through the mud so thoroughly that it felt impossible to salvage. Victor had won, or at least it looked that way. For the first time in weeks, I didn't hear from Lisa. Her texts and calls stopped entirely, and a small part of me wondered if she'd finally given up. But the guilt wouldn't let me rest. No matter how much anger I felt, I couldn't stop thinking about her, about how much of this had been her mistake, and how much had been Victor pulling the strings. The break in silence came late one night when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call, just a single text from her. Nick, I'm sorry for everything. Goodbye. I froze, staring at the screen as my stomach dropped. It didn't feel like her usual frantic messages. This one was final, haunting. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and drove to the house. When I got there, the lights were off. The quiet felt oppressive, and the pit in my stomach grew as I knocked on the door. No answer. I used my key and let myself in, my heart pounding. Lisa, I called out, my voice echoing through the empty house. No response. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, her face pale and tear-streaked. An empty bottle of pills lay on the coffee table beside her, next to a hastily scribbled note. Panic surged through me. Lisa, I shouted, rushing to her side. Her eyes fluttered open weakly, and for a moment, she looked at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. "Nick," she murmured, her voice faint. I couldn't take it anymore. "Everyone, everything." I didn't let her finish. I grabbed my phone and called 911, barely able to explain the situation through my trembling voice. The paramedics arrived within minutes, and I stood there, helpless, as they loaded her onto a stretcher. One of them turned to me and said, "She's lucky you found her when you did. Any longer?" And he didn't have to finish. I followed the ambulance to the hospital, my mind racing. How had it come to this? How had a woman I once loved so deeply, the woman I'd shared a life with, been reduced to this broken version of herself? Hours later, a doctor finally came out to speak with me. "She's stable," he said. "We pumped her stomach in time. She's going to need monitoring, and I'd recommend she see a counselor as soon as possible. But physically, she'll recover." I nodded, relief washing over me. But the weight of everything still sat heavy on my chest. When I finally saw her, she was lying in a hospital bed, her face pale and drawn. Her eyes opened when she heard me walk in, and tears immediately welled up. "Nick," she whispered, "I didn't want you to see me like this." I pulled up a chair beside her and sat down, running a hand over my face. "Lisa, what were you thinking?" She broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't see a way out," she cried. "Everywhere I turn, people hate me. I ruined everything. My career, my reputation, us. I didn't think I could live with it anymore. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was still angry, but another part of me felt a deep, aching sadness for her. "This isn't the way, Lisa," I said quietly. "You made mistakes, big ones. But this? You're not going to fix anything by giving up." She looked at me, her eyes hollow. "What's left for me, Nick? My career is over. My name is a joke. I've lost you. I've lost everything." I took a deep breath, my emotions swirling. "You're not going to rebuild overnight," I said. "But you can't let Victor win. He wants you broken. He wants you to fall apart so he can keep painting himself as the victim. Don't give him that satisfaction." Her lip quivered. "Do you hate me?" she asked softly. I hesitated, the question cutting deeper than I expected. "I don't hate you, Lisa," I said finally. "I hate what you did. I hate how you hurt me. But I don't think I could ever hate you." Tears spilled down her cheeks again, but this time they were quieter. "I don't deserve your kindness," she said. "This isn't kindness," I said firmly. "This is me telling you the truth. If you want to make things right, you have to fight. You can't quit. Not like this." For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of determination in her eyes. It was faint, but it was there. "I'll try," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good," I said, standing up, "because no matter how much of a mess this has become, you don't get to let it end here. Not like this." I left the hospital that night feeling more exhausted than I'd ever felt in my life. But for the first time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Victor might have won this round, but Lisa wasn't going to let him define her story. And neither was I.